Hope is here. The way to break free with your host, Angela Pedigo, will light a flame within you. Host Angela Pedigo is an author, speaker, and certified life recovery, grief, and joy restoration coach. Angela uses her own life experiences to help you navigate and guide you to success. She also has developed tools that incorporate her faith and her drive to overcome any obstacle in life. So please welcome the host of The Way to Break Free, Angela Pedigo.
Welcome to The Way to Break Free. I'm your host, Angie Pedigo, and I am so excited today. I hope you are tuning in. Share this video today because you are not going to want to miss it. I'm super thrilled to have a very special guest to me today, Miss Shantell Bohon. I have the wonderful privilege of being able to serve with her on a day-to-day basis, and I have just grown to love her like she is just one of my own. So she has had a long journey through her life, and I don't want to waste any time today getting into that because she's got some really, really good things today. And we've brought her on to talk about some of those things she's experienced in her life. Now, Shantell, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here.
Me too.
I've been looking forward to this for a long time, and I've heard you talk about some things at some of our events and stuff that we've been to and set up at. So one of the things that I know that she has experienced a lot of is trauma in her life. And let's just kind of start there today. So tell me, what would you say is the biggest trauma that you've experienced in your life?
So the biggest trauma would be when my son's father took his life. And it was a really vulnerable time in my life when that happened.
Yeah. Can you kind of take us there? Like, walk us through, you said it was a very vulnerable time in your life. So like, where were you at in your life leading up to that moment?
So I'm in recovery and I have 3 years sober last month.
Congratulations, by the way.
His 3-year anniversary of passing away was in January as well. So he actually helped me get sober. I was with him, detoxing and going through that chapter of my life, and had left his house 3 days prior to the suicide. So I was 11 days sober whenever the suicide happened. So it was a really vulnerable time in my life. So I was trying to navigate through early recovery. I wasn't really involved in meetings or, sponsorship, 12 steps, anything like that at the time. It was just something that I knew I needed to do, that I wanted to do. And he was willing to help me through that. I knew that he was struggling mentally himself. He had actually had a suicide attempt that October before that January and wasn't successful. He spent some time getting mental health help, was released, seemed fine. Something that I heard later on was you don't really look for a suicide until after it happens. I was obviously alert, knowing that he just come from that. But he seemed okay. I was also going through detox and going through my own journey of trying to get well and trying to get better, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all of it. So yeah, it was a really hard time, 11 days sober and trying to navigate that while also getting the call of that happening. It's probably the most broken time of my life, I'd say.
I cannot imagine how you did that. Like in that moment, those early days in recovery as well. Sometimes people deal with recovery and sometimes people deal with suicide, but then you were dealing with like a 1-2 punch right there, all in one fell swoop. Like, what was your go-to? Like, what was your go-to in that moment? How'd you find the strength to navigate that?
Well, in that moment, where I was at in my walk, like with my life, was working a job 6 days a week, very long hours. I had my son's father there to help out with our son and stuff. So it was what I was having to do to make it at the time, and I had saved up all my like sick days and stuff because I knew that this was something that I had been planning to get sober for a year, like trying to get my mind straight on like I can't like I have to be able to work still to be able to provide, because I was a single mom, but I had saved up all my time at work. Like maybe this is enough time for me to detox and be able to get back to work and stuff. So I was kind of navigating through all that. When he passed away, it was just like everything in me broke, but at the same time, like I had been mentally broken before. That's what led me to wanting to get sober. I was at a mental rock bottom. Like I didn't lose everything in my life. I had lost all sanity. I felt like, so when that happened, I knew God, but I didn't really have a relationship with him. I knew about him from, church or like just hearing other people talk about him, but I didn't personally know him yet, but it was in that moment that, I just felt so broken and I didn't know what to do. Like I didn't know how to navigate through recovery. I was so early in it. I didn't know, I was scared as a mother, like for my son. And like, I don't know, I just felt broken. I didn't really know what to do. So I remember sitting on the couch, and I had stayed up for, like 2 days solid, just thinking of like what my next steps are. Like, what am I going to do? I remember sitting on my couch, like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I just started praying. And I was like, God, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know what to do in this situation. I'm just surrendering my entire life to you right now, that you're going to navigate me through this and help me, because I have no idea what steps to take next. I knew that I needed to be at home more, for my son, that I couldn't work the job that I was working, but I had no idea where I was going to go. I had no idea what I was going to do. I didn't know anything. I was very confused. So, as I was thinking of all that, it was the first time in my life that I didn't blame God. It was the first time that, that I had lost somebody, because I had previously lost my brother to a drug overdose. I blamed God. Anything traumatic that ever happened in my life, I blamed him for it, and I pushed him away. I didn't ever like come to him with it. So this is the first time that I ever skipped that part. And I just went straight to like, God help me. Like, I don't know what to do. So I'd say, that was my initial, of how am I going to get through this? What's going to help me through this?
Jump started that. So let's dive into something. Let's go into like his suicide part. Like now, like you mentioned earlier, when you said you don't see a suicide, coming up to that point until after it's over with. I think a lot of people sometimes, when they experience the death of a loved one in this way, that there's a lot of blame, a lot of guilt. Like, what could I have caught? What should I have paid more attention to something? The woulda, coulda, shouldas, Did you go through that? Like, did you feel those things? And if so, like, how did you navigate through that?
So I didn't blame him. I had blame on myself in a sense. I felt like there was more that I could do. I felt really guilty. But I never blamed him, because I've had my own struggle with mental health and suicidal ideation. So I understand how it feels to be in so much pain that you just don't want to be, But I had a hard time I felt angry for my son. I felt angry for the walk that we was going to have to go through. And I felt, I even went through a stage of feeling, like I felt like it was unfair that he was the one that was successful. And, I struggled with addiction. I'm like early in recovery. So I went through this like pity stage, I guess. But the hardest part about the suicide was there was no, there's such a stigma on it. It was really hard for me to, it's always, as soon as you say suicide, people look like they don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. So I almost felt like I was in the shadows with it, that like, how do I talk to people about this? How do I get support? Like, how do I, like, I know the stages of grief. So that kind of helped me, with the blame, the guilt, the shame, all the things. But with him personally, like I looked for signs. I felt like after his first attempt, um, but the funny thing is when people are struggling like that, they paint this beautiful picture of I'm fine, like everything is good. Like he was better then than I had ever seen him in his life. He had struggled with anger. He had struggled with a lot of different things, in his life, a lot of his own traumas that happened. But it was like in that few month time frame, he was so happy. He was spending way more time with his children, with his family. Just everything looked different. And when you would think of someone struggling with mental health, depression, suicide, you would think of them being more gloomy, more sad, more shut off from the world. And he didn't look like that. So when it happened, I just kept playing the tape and kept playing the tape and kept playing the tape. What did I miss? What did I not see? And that's what I didn't see is that picture that was painted. He was masking, he was masking how he truly felt. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, it does. That's not your fault, and that's not anybody else's fault, that's experienced that. It's something that it's hard to understand because sometimes you don't know what was going on in their mind or in their lives, or what took them to that place. But it's not your fault for not catching it. This is one of the things that when we're coaching with people, sometimes I have to share with them that there's only one that can see everything and knows why somebody's about to do what they do. That's God himself. But it's not something that we can always prevent or we can always catch. It's hard for families and parents to, like, if they've lost a loved one, it could be a parent, it could be a child that you've lost, whatever that might be. It's hard to navigate that sometimes in the guilt thing. So you mentioned that you went through that, like it kept cycling over in your mind. What finally brought you to the place where that cycling started to slow down and it finally got it to stop, like where the blame shift stopped, where you were blaming yourself for not catching it?
Well, I had to take a lot of steps to get to that place. I went through like I obsessed over it, thought about all these things. I feel like I know that God like showed up in my life so heavy because there were so many things that happened that it wasn't me, and I didn't have really a support system at that time. And just to take you back to like when I was sitting on that couch and I just told God, like, help me make my next steps because I don't know what to do. Like I don't know. You don't have no book that tells you like, hey, when this happens, like this is what you do. So I just prayed about it, like how, like I quit my job. So I was jobless. Like I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew that I needed to be there for my son at that time to kind of walk him through what just happened, and like what we needed to do. I was very honest with my son and age appropriate level. He was 4 when it happened. So as he's aged, questions have come, but I started putting in job applications and I prayed over every single application that I put in. And I would just pray over it that like, God, if this is where I'm supposed to be, like, give me a sign that I cannot ignore that this is where I'm supposed to go. And I'd put in several job applications and I went and interviewed at all of them on the same day. Like it was just back to back. And I went to one specifically that it just felt like it felt homey for some reason in there. Like the atmosphere, like everything about it felt really homey, but it was the least paying job. So I had this part of me of like survival mode of like, is this like the feeling that I felt in there? Is this going to help? Like, am I going to be able to provide for me and my son and like make it? I had went to all the other job interviews. I liked it, but it just didn't have that feeling that I felt in the one. So I prayed over it and they asked me back for a second interview, and that was to hire me on if I wanted to take the job. So I went, and it was just like a double confirmation that this is where I'm supposed to go. So I took the job and it ended up being a mental health center. I didn't connect anything at the time.
Isn't that amazing?
I didn't connect it at the time, but when I started working there, it was just so beautiful how laid out it was for me. This place is really what jump started my healing journey to be able to get to the place to be able to stop everything that was going on in my own mind.
That is, look at God showing up.
Mhm.
Look at him showing up. There is so much more to this story. Appreciate you diving into that, kind of setting the stage. So we're going to keep this conversation going, but we're going to take a quick break here. Word from our sponsors, and we'll be back in just a moment.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them. Rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies. Find settings that allow them to be the most productive and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
We are back from the break. We are speaking today with Shantell Bohon, and this is life after suicide. She has been through a lot. She's kind of set the stage. So if you missed the first 15 minutes, you're going to want to go back and pick that up. And Shantell, where we left off before the break, you were telling us how that, God started showing up and navigating you in the days like right after this, leading you to a job. You had to quit your job. So you took this other job, and it wasn't maybe the best paying job, but you're at a mental health facility of all places where you needed to be, in a center that felt like home. I want to hit one thing right here before we keep going into like this road. Well, you're probably going to hit it, but I just want to say this. There's such a stigma about getting help, period, in general. There's such a stigma on mental health. And sometimes mental health looks like grief. Sometimes mental health looks like I've just lost all the joy in my life. I just am struggling. I can't seem to navigate today. I just want to get out of this space that I'm in. People, I don't think, acknowledge those things as like mental health areas that could be served. In seeking help, in getting help, because we're going to get into that, with your story and stuff. But what would you say to people out there that know that where they're at, they're stuck and they can't seem to get out of a space and they can't seem to move forward? Would you encourage them to seek that mental health help?
100%. Yeah, 100%. That is something that I struggle with myself, the stigma that was on mental health and just not wanting people to know, or like feeling weak, I guess. Through my journey, I've learned that was the strongest thing that I could have ever done for myself and the people around me. I tell people, therapist shop. If you find a therapist and you don't connect with them, or it just doesn't feel like a fit for you, don't give up on seeking help, because at the end of the day, you're going to get help, So if you meet with somebody and it doesn't work out, don't feel bad to continue looking and to just tell them, I don't think this is a good fit, and try to find another therapist. I went through that. I had to therapy shop because I had a bad taste in my mouth with previous therapists. And I tried something completely different the next time I went. And it was a God thing. I truly believe that it was a faith-based place. That's what worked for me. But yeah, I would encourage people, even if you don't feel like you fit in the category of like, oh, I don't have any trauma, I don't have any grief, I don't have this, I don't have that. My therapist has helped me with even financial things, just like, it doesn't always have to be a fire that I'm bringing to him, like, help me put this out, or like I go to him and share the good things too, and just to have a safe place to be able to kind of bounce those things off of, or and it just reminds me of like, look at where you was at and look at how far you've come. So like, even if you don't feel like you fit into the like to needing a therapist aspect, I think that anybody and everybody can benefit from therapy. It helps you grow, you learn things in there. But 100%, if you are struggling, don't let the stigma from the outside prevent you from going to get help and find that hope, because that's what I found there was not only hope in my life, but hope because of the way that I was seeing God show up in my life with the job that I got, with the therapist that I got, just with how easy it was, to be vulnerable, because that was something that was hard for me.
What do you think in therapy? Of course, you're working there, you're exposed to it, all day long. Or I say exposed to it, but you're watching other people come in and go, and they're getting help. And so how did working there and that job, which, I'm sure you were able to probably, benefit from a lot of the resources that were there as well. Of those resources, what helped you? Like, take us through like progression for you. How did you, like, what were the phases? How did you navigate through that?
So initially I told you that I didn't really have a relationship with God. Like I would talk to him and I knew him, but I didn't know him, like personally from my life. So the cool thing about this place is it was faith-based. I was still kind of standoffish to some things. But it gave me so much hope whenever I got there, and because I had no hope. Like, I was early in recovery. I was kind of ashamed to even be open about that. They had no idea that I had just experienced a suicide. So I had all this stuff that I was carrying in with me to this job. And they would have this morning meeting on Wednesdays where we would just kind of share a devotion and we would pray with one another and stuff. I remember when I first went in, I'm like, I'll participate, but I'm not going to pray and I'm not going to read a devotion, but I'll come and I'll sit there, and I just had this, these walls up. And I remember like the first or second time that I went into that, Wednesday morning, I seen firsthand that I looked at these therapists like they were perfect, that like, I'm the one that's broken coming in here. And like, you guys are, you had to be perfect to be a therapist, like you surely don't have any struggles. How are you helping other people?
Right.
But that was my like perception of this. So when I came to the table and heard the way that they prayed for one another, and then like them sharing their own life struggles and just all these things, I seen like, they're just like me, like we've all had different walks in life. And I created a stigma around myself and around the mental health and like around them, to where that kind of helped me drop those walls of the stigma that I had created myself. I was a part of the stigma on the outside without realizing it, So when I was sitting there and like I was experiencing this, I'm like, wow. And I just openly told them, I'm like, man, I'm glad that I came in here because I just thought that you guys were perfect. And like, I feel so much safer to be vulnerable in here and just let you guys know where I'm at and like what I've come from. And so as I started sharing that, I was encouraged to, start therapy myself. I was coming out of an extremely domestic relationship at the time as well. And that's what kind of pushed me to go into therapy. I had no idea that this, all these other things that had happened in my life or that was happening in my life was why I needed to go to therapy too. But it was encouraged because of this one thing that was happening. So I went because I hadn't been open with them about, the suicide that I experienced. So as I started working with my therapist, the first session, I just go in there and I just dump, everything that like, I'm early in recovery. Like I have no idea what I'm doing with any of my life at all, or how to navigate through these things. And I just I feel like a trauma dumped on him. And just the support that I had in there, and just the way that the best way for me to explain it is like a yarn ball of like all these different colors of yarn. That's what my brain felt like when I first went in there. And I felt like my therapist was just sitting there. Okay, here's the purple, like, and he was unwinding that. Here's the blue, like, and unwinding that. Here's the yellow. And by the end of that session, I felt like that yarn ball was down to one color.
Oh, wow.
And it felt so freeing. And when I left out of there, I felt so hopeful that, like, not only for myself, but for my son, because where I removed that stigma by participating, I'm safe. I feel safe and comfortable to lead my son on this journey as well.
Yes.
That this is something that he can benefit from, because I am not a therapist, and I have no idea how to navigate him through this or how to help him. But I wasn't fixing to put him in therapy because I had the stigma against therapy. Like, it never worked for me in the past. So, like, why would I give it another try? So when I felt that in there, which I feel again was truly a God thing, like my therapist was giving me scripture, like he was bringing me back to God in these yarn ball pulls, and it helped me from that moment forward be like, okay, this is something that my son could probably benefit from too, which led us to like him doing his own individual therapy, me doing my individual therapy, and then us coming together at times to do sessions together. And that was a big help in being able to slow the blame down, to be able to slow the what did I miss? Like, my therapist was able to kind of walk me through that. And he broke it down to me basically with it's a cup, and there's all kinds of coins in this cup. And while you can take credit for a few of the coins, you can't take credit for all of them, And that was when I was able to kind of step back and be like, I need to get rid of this guilt and the shame that I'm feeling, because it was keeping me in the dark, which initially would take me back out to using if I stayed in that space, So yeah, I guess that's really the walk that I, went through with the therapy aspect. And like, I'm still in therapy today. Even though I feel like I'm in a lot better place with the suicide. I used to not even be able to talk about it. And even when it was hard for me to talk about, I still advocated for mental health. I still tried, because I feel like there's such a on that word, and there's so many people that feel like they can't talk, like they feel like they're looked at different if they do share it, or there's just such a stigma over it that it's kind of brushed under the rug and it's not explained. And that's something that I don't want my son to, when he has questions, and like as he's had questions, I don't want him to feel like that's a part of his life, a big part of his life. And I don't want him to feel like he has to hide that, or that he has to feel shameful for it. I want him to boldly be able to to be able to understand mental health. And like, that's something like the same way that I've taught him with my recovery. Like, yeah, I was an addict, but look at my recovery. Yeah, my dad lost his battle to mental health, but this is what I know and what I believe and what I've learned about mental health, and to be able to stand in his story confidently. And to be able to do that, you've got to remove the stigma around it. And you've got to talk about it. And it's hard to talk about. It's hard to share those things. It's hard to be vulnerable about hard things like that, the same way I felt about my addiction, And I've just kind of went for this situation the same way of like, let's talk about it, Let's talk about it.
That's beautiful. Like, so much can be accomplished to just talk about it. You had said something when we were talking about having a safe place to share. And you may not identify with having traumas and having grief or certain things that you feel like would land somebody in a place where they would need to seek mental health. But one of those things about therapy is it's like having your own little private space that you can share and speak and just say about anything that you're struggling with for the week, the day, the whatever, that it goes nowhere. Like, so many people hold things in. So we're gonna hold on that note. I want you to see if that applies to you while we're on this break. And when we're gonna come back, we're gonna go into the next layer of this between you and your son. We'll be back in just a moment.
Master of words, powerful player,
What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet every Monday at noon Eastern on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom on the BBM Global Network as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back from the break. We are going to continue our discussion with Shantell and talking about life after suicide. So, Shantell, before the break, we were talking about your job, and you had entered therapy as well, working at this center. You mentioned a couple of times in the last segment about your son and like having to learn how to navigate him. And I believe you said that he was 4 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So can you kind of take us there? Like, this was 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
What has life been like for you? Like, I know you have been peeling back layers of an onion to like get, to the core for yourself. What has that been like for your son?
Sure. Well, during me going to therapy, I also got plugged into meetings, a sponsor into the recovery field. So I walked him with me through all of that and been very open with him about it. So I just walked him through my healing journey too, to help, to whatever I was doing, I was showing that to him. So one of the things that came to my mind was, I can either let this break me or I can let it grow me. And I wanted to show him that too, that I didn't let that break me. So I remember him asking really hard questions, really, really hard questions. He was 4, but if you know Zane, but just to give him, like, he's very intelligent, very emotionally intelligent. And therapy helped him with that as well, to like really get in tune with his emotions and feel them and speak out about them. Mm-hmm. There's times I wish he didn't know as much as he did. He's very honest. But I remember driving to work. He was coming to work with me, and he would just kind of hang out at the center. So he was learning all these things about a therapeutic atmosphere there. So he healed a lot in those rooms. And there were certain things that would make him question things. So I remember driving there to work one day, and he's like, "Mom," I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "I remember going to my dad's funeral." And I'm like, "His funeral?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Yeah, me too." And it was still very touchy for me, like on just like what to say. Mm-hmm. And he's like, "Why was my dad so hard when I hugged him?" And it was like a gut punch. I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to answer that when we get to the center." And like I rushed past him, like, "How do you answer that for him?" I wanted to not answer his questions. Yeah. And I learned that that's the worst thing that I could do. Mm-hmm. That a child's mind, you know, like when you don't answer their questions, they're going to form their own opinion. And that's what he started doing. From my experience, he would come up with worse things than what really happened. And they're like, just explain the science of it. So I did. He asked me what happened to his dad, and I just told him at 4 that his dad was sick. And no, he wasn't. I seen him that day, and he was fine. Well, sometimes people have a sickness that you can't see, and your dad was struggling with his mental health, and that was enough for him at the time. When he asked those questions at 4, I knew that there was going to be a lot of questions, and they were probably going to get a lot harder. So that was the best thing I felt that I could do, is kind of to walk him through that with me. Well, at this point, like I'm really getting to know God. You know, I'm learning all these things in therapy. I'm learning all these things with my sponsor and with meetings, and just leading me closer and closer to God, and like building that relationship with him. And I started just, because I didn't know what to do, I started just giving my son back to God every day. Like, you gave him to me, I'm giving him back to you for the day, you know. Just walk with us through this. Like, whatever I lack, be that for me. Whatever I don't know, give me the wisdom and the knowledge to do that. Give me the resources to be able to provide that for him. And he did. Like, he showed up in my life in so many ways. Like, here's this. Like, I had to do the footwork, the legwork, but he provided it for me. He laid it right in my path to be able to grab it up and to be able to walk that. He laid people in my life that had experienced exactly what my son was experiencing. So they were adults at this point. So I got to kind of interact with them of like, what was things that your mom could have done different that she just didn't know, and kind of got feedback on that to kind of walk my son through that. Like, okay, so like, I know that I need to sharpen up here, you know, or like, this is good for me to put him in this to be able to help him. And there were times that me and my son would be at home, and he would be sad, and he would want to look through pictures and stuff. So doing that, like, I would get sad, and like I would cry, and I would explain to him, like, it's okay to feel our feelings. It's okay for us to feel sad about this. It's okay for us to even feel mad about it, you know? And he's like, well, I feel really sad, Mom. I feel really sad that my dad's not here. And I was like, where do I walk him from here? I walk him to God. So that is where that's where I introduced my son to who God was. Like, you may not have an earthly father anymore, but you have a heavenly Father, and that's who you can go to with anything that you feel burdened by, or even the good things. Like, this is somebody that you can go to and you can talk to about anything. And he just kind of was like, how do we do that? I'm like, let's pray. Do you want to pray about it? And he's like, yeah. So I start praying, and we're like locked in hands, and I was like, is there anything that you want to tell God? And he's like, yeah. So he's like, thank you, God, so much for my mom. And he's like walking through these things, like my grandparents. I thank you for therapy. Like, he was grateful for therapy. And then he just paused for a minute, and he's like, God, I'm not thankful that my daddy's not here. And I was so proud of him. I'm like, that's very expressive. And like, yeah, God wants to know all of that. Like, give him the raw truth of how you feel. Like, tell him about it. Tell him how mad you are about it. Tell him how it's made you feel. Like, tell him how it's impacted your day, or, you know, whatever. And he did. So like, when we would pray at night, it was so beautiful walking that with him, because I learned so much from him. Like, his childlikeness, going to God childlike, it taught me how to go to God childlike without reservations, or without, I have to hold this back because like I should feel shameful for, you know, telling God this. I didn't, because the way that he was so blunt with God, I'm like, man, I'm fixing to do the same thing. You know? Like, God, I'm hurt over this, or like this, like, I'm angry. I'm feeling these ways. And we just walked this walk with God, and like learning who he was, and just taking the things that we didn't know what to do with it, and taking it to him. And Zane has, walking the suicide journey with Zane has taught me so much about myself, about being a mother, about ending the cycles of things. That kid's growth through this journey has taught me so much about myself, but also just how important it is to talk about it, you know, and I talked about it with him. You know, it's a part of him. It's a part of his story. Not letting his dad's life be in vain because of a permanent temporary feeling that he had or temporary pain that he had, let it be. Like he made a permanent decision.
Yes.
And not letting, I don't want Zane to grow up with that darkness, that dark shadow that I feel like a lot of people feel. Like I have felt it in grief, but it's so different with suicide. When the suicide happened, I felt that blackness around me, like of just how do you talk about this? And walking this with him, he can talk about it so freely. Like this is just a part of my story, like it's like he doesn't feel shame for it or feel like it's a no. Like he's very open with it, and sometimes it shocks other people that's around. Like in where I go to meetings at, there's a group for the children, and he has created this safe place with the teacher in there that he just openly talks about it. Like he asks questions, and he like there's kids in there that advocate, I guess, kind of for like the recovery piece, and Zane's big on that, but he's also like, I know something that's bad for you that has to do with mental health or but he just talks about it,
Yeah.
and I encourage that, and I walk that with him because I think that that's good. I think that that's the best thing that we can do is to talk about it, share about it. So my walk with him has been very spiritual. It grew my spiritual journey.
Yes.
Because in order for me to teach you about God, I have to know him. And like I have to know what I'm telling you, to be able to lead you there. So it's really kept me sharp on growing that relationship with God, continuing my recovery journey, continuing my mental health journey. That's why I will stay in therapy. People have asked me, when are you going to quit going to therapy? I don't know. Like I don't see an end point with therapy because it's still helping me. I'm still benefiting from it. So I don't have an end date on my therapy. I feel like this is it's your journey, and you just walk it. Like whatever has been helping you or has been feeding you during this time, like you continue doing it.
Yeah. Zane, the fact that, man, something stood out so powerfully is that in his prayer, and he could say, "Thank you, God, for therapy."
Mm-hmm.
And he was what, maybe 5?
Mm-hmm.
So something. To know that a 5-year-old that's one of the things, like you would think that would not be the thing that comes to their mind in that moment of their list of gratitudes or things that it's not like going to the doctor and getting a shot, where kids hate that. The fact that that's a thing that he was so grateful for just further puts a stamp on what you're saying of speak about it. And now he's speaking about it and giving your kids, your loved ones, it doesn't matter if it's a child, it doesn't matter if it's an adult, giving one another a safe space to be able to speak about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know as a parent, sometimes you have to kind of like brace for the worst, and you have to like, this is going to be hard and it's a gut punch kind of thing in the moment, but to be able to like set our own emotions aside for just a moment to give that safe space to our children. And sometimes we just can't do that because like you were healing in your own space. And that's where he had the therapist. He has the teacher like you're talking about.
Yeah. Feeling my emotions, maybe where he's a boy, he felt the protector instinct. So there was a lot of things that, even though we had a safe place to share, he did not feel safe to share them with me because he was afraid of it hurting me. So his therapist gave him that outlet of he could drop it all in there and had somebody to navigate through it with him. And he also experienced stigma around therapy through his grandparents, who was raised in a different generation where that wasn't acceptable, or there had to be something wrong with you to go to therapy. And I remember, like in school, Zane would just tell everybody that he was in therapy. Like, yeah, I got therapies today at 3. Like he was just so open about it. And then he would ask me, like, why doesn't my grandma and papa like me going to therapy, or why do they say stuff about it? And I'm like, well, there's some people that just wasn't talked about, like it just wasn't okay, or there was a stigma around it where they thought there had to be something really wrong with you to go to therapy. And I said, that's where you can advocate for yourself of what it's doing for you. Like just share what it's doing for you and like why you enjoy it. And so when he would talk to kids at school, he would tell them like, I got therapies and like I do this and this in therapies, and like I get to talk about my dad, and like it was so freeing to him. Like it wasn't of, I gotta go to therapy today. Like he loved going to therapy. And there was a point in time where we stopped therapy for him because he graduated. She's like, I don't think he really needs this anymore. Maybe when he gets a little older, when more questions come, he can come back. He's in a place where he will come to me and tell me, Mom, I think I need somebody to talk to. And he's 7 now. So him being able to do that, that's something that therapy did for him, was open that up for him of when he's struggling, like, I need help. And I think that I need to go back to therapy, Mom.
Let that sink in, guys. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet every Monday at noon Eastern on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom on the BBM Global Network, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back from the break. We are wrapping up our conversation today with Shantell, who is so graciously sharing her journey of, for her and her son, actually, life after suicide. And Shantell, you have shared some amazing things with us today. Like, there's so much to this story. You know, you and I have shared this a lot, off camera, and I hope you will come back, maybe multiple times, so we can kind of like zone in on some of those specific areas. I remember you talking one time about going to a grief, like a grief support group,
Mm-hmm.
and how you felt in that moment. And it was simply the difference in someone, passing away that people were there grieving over versus someone passing away by suicide. Which is another reason why, sometimes people think, well, okay, I can go to a support group. And you were talking about shopping for therapists, like therapy shopping. But sometimes you have to support group shop as well,
Mm-hmm.
not just to go to one and done kind of thing. What do you think the difference is for people who are experiencing the death of a loved one by suicide versus someone who passed away, say, from a medical condition or something?
Well, personally, I think that from the grief support group that I joined, I feel like there's a stigma on when someone takes their own life, where do they go? Where do they go? So I think that's a part of what makes it so awkward for people when you say that. Like, typically they're like, oh, they're in a better place, or like some of these things. Some people don't know that they don't know to say that, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Without really going too deep into that.
Yeah.
The support group that I had went to, I expected to be treated the same as everybody else there that had experienced grief, but I got that same stigma there of, if I felt so uncomfortable, because when I had shared what I was going through and what had happened, it wasn't, it was almost like a pity of like, where when I seen other people share, it wasn't like a pity thing. It was like people was relating, like it was relatable. They could share how they coped and got through it. But there was nobody in that room that had anything like that to share for me. Besides like, I guess sympathy, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, that wasn't what I needed. I didn't go to another grief support group. I did find other support groups to go to that wasn't just for grief, that kind of helped me navigate through all the things with it. But yeah, that was kind of like a smack in the face, I guess, going to that support group, and it just being, I didn't get anything that I needed from it. And I felt like there was a stigma around suicide, even there with grief, like grief and just life after suicide. Like nobody really talks about it. So like, what does life look like after suicide? Like, what helped you? Like, how did you navigate through that? A lot of people bury it. And from my experience, like they bury it, and it's something they just don't talk about. Like, yeah, that person passed away, but it's not talked about really. And it was something that I needed to talk about. I needed to talk through. I needed to know what life looks like after that, because it wasn't an aunt or an uncle or a brother. It was my son's father. So like, I'm like, this was close to home. Like, I'm having to walk him daily through this, you know? So yeah.
Which kind of leads me into my next question, because you said at first, you couldn't find what you needed. A, you didn't know what you needed, except other than you needed to talk about it. And B, you were having a hard time finding that, until A, you tapped God in, and B, you got the job and you started going to the therapy where you were getting more of what you needed. So what can you give to anybody who might be listening to this that is in the early stages and they've experienced something like this, and maybe it's not even in the early stages of the experience itself? They could have buried that for years, like you said, but it would be considered the early stages of starting to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
What is something that you could say to anybody listening today that would have helped you, now knowing what you know, in those early days when you were needing some feedback from someone? What would you say to them?
I would tell you to look into therapy shop, talk about it. Talking about it, I shared a lot about it on my social media as well. And because of sharing that, I found so many other people that struggled with the same thing, that like would reach out to me and give me advice and help. Therapy, relationship with God, and speaking out about it.
That is beautiful. I hope if you are listening today that you will take these words of wisdom. And like I said, I feel like we were talking at the break. We feel like we've just scratched the surface. So she's definitely going to have to come back. But yeah, reach out. Don't let stigmas keep you from healing, because you got a long life to live, and there's no point in just holding on to that. So I wanted to thank you guys for tuning in today. Please share this video, like and subscribe to Bold Brave TV. Share this video with people may be struggling, or even if you don't know of anybody, somebody that might be in your list that's silently struggling could find it. So tune in with us next week. We plan to have another guest, another topic. And I want to thank Bold Brave TV for making all this possible. They are so great to navigate this show, and just share away. And I hope you have a blessed week. And if you're out there struggling, seek that help. Thanks for watching.
This has been The Way to Break Free with your host, Angela Pedigo. The one thing Angela attributes her personal victories to is her relationship with God and her deep faith. Tune in each week and hear stories and testimonies of people in personal and professional trenches and how they overcome them with their own faith in God. The Way to Break Free has something for everyone, everywhere. Right here, Wednesdays, noon Eastern, on the Bold Brave TV network.